Emporio Ivankov should have been a dragon. 38 years ago on God Valley, shenaniganry occurred as the Rocks Pirates, the Roger Pirates, the Marines, and the Holy Knights fight battle royaled one another to claim the great treasure of Hachinosu. And Emporio Ivankov was also there. This future adult came within a hee-haw of consuming the Uunumi model Seiryu. In fact, his mouth was significantly closer to that magical fruit than Bartholomew Kuma's mouth was to the Niku Niku no Mi. Then a somewhat large mother interrupted and history was made. But what if the somewhat large mother didn't rudely interrupt Emporio Ivankov's meal? Or what if she did, but it was just a few seconds later, allowing Ivankov to get in that ever so important nibble? Well, what happens is things. Despite having the mythical Zoan, Ivankov will probably not be all that useful on God Valley. I imagine him being very similar to Momonosuke when he first ate his dragon fruit. So Kuma's gonna zap him and roughly 499 other people away. But that's only one side of the story. We also need to consider poor young-ish Kaido, who had all of his dragon hopes and dreams stolen from him on that day. After this point, Kaido and Ivankov part ways. They will never meet again. In fact, they never met to begin with. It was Big Mom that Eva met. And Big Mom is gonna feel bad, like really bad about this, because Kaido was like family to her. Family that she didn't have to give birth to, which is very, very rare. So Charlotte Linlin will seek out a consolation fruit for Lil Bro. I was gonna refer to Kaido as Linlin's Oni-chan because it would have been a fun Oni pun, but sadly Oni-chan means older brother, thus ruining everything. But Kaido will eat this consolation fruit and immediately become very, very confused as he finds himself clad in the trademark leotard of Emporio Ivankov because Big Mom has fed him the Horu Horu no Mi. So what we've got is a classic case of fruit swap on our hands. And One Piece has gone from drag queen to dragon queen, which is not my joke, I stole it from the comments. And thus begins our very bizarre fruit swap adventure. As everything went all according to plan, Ivankov is going to leave Kuma and Ginny on the Sorbet Kingdom to eventually go on to join the freedom fighters led by Dragon. And this is our first and probably most enduring problem. There will be an argument over who gets to be called Dragon. In fact, anytime someone says Dragon, both Dragon and Ivankov are going to look in that general direction. And then the person who called is going to have to clarify, no, I meant that one, but also I like you too. And it's just going to be an absolute social nightmare. But on the bright side, it's going to greatly confuse their enemies as well. People in the press are going to hear stories about this dragon man, and they're also going to receive pictures of a completely different man dragon. So they put two and two together as any reasonable fictional reporter would, and eventually Dragon's wanted poster may even contain a picture of Emporio Ivankov in dragon form. It's also going to highlight just how much of a fraud the Celestial Dragons are. I mean, they call themselves dragons, and yet they don't even have one. It's pathetic. In terms of skill set, Ivankov's abilities experience a pretty sharp increase. So the really cool thing is that Ivankov is still capable of using almost his entire skill set. Ivankov doesn't often blend Newcomer Kempo with his Devil Fruit powers, and the times when he does, well, he can do the exact same thing with the Dragon Fruit, just much more better. The example I'm thinking of would be something like Hellwing, which Ivankov performs after ballooning his face. And in this case, all he needs to do is transform, and there's a mighty dragon visage, ready to use as many Hellwinks as Ivankov desires. Admittedly, it may be less thematically appropriate, but Ivankov is now next level dangerous. And you might think that this means that Kaido has been debuffed, but that would be a very incorrect assumption, and quite frankly, shame on you for assuming it. With the Horu Horu no Mi, I think that Kaido absolutely becomes physically stronger than any of the forms we've seen of him before. The dragon scales are pretty tough, but this is an injection of raw power, and it brings new meaning to the title of World's Strongest Creature, although the narrator may need to change Kaido's introduction. In the manga, the narrator says land, sea, or air, but really it's just land and sea now. Actually, maybe not even sea. I assume that sea was thrown in there because Kaido can float over it as a dragon, so it's not even sea, it's just land now. On land, and well, just that. If it's one-on-one on land, always bet on Kaido. However, if it's in the sky or on the water, then check with your local bookmaker first. That's going to be Kaido's introduction. But I personally feel like Kaido was never at his best in his dragon form. It made him a really big target, it gave him some very clunky movement, and the true devastation he inflicted was almost always delivered in his regular or hybrid form. But Kaido can and will still transform, all thanks to the power of the Kaido Gunman's Heicho hormone, which means Kaido face growth hormone. Kaido can now inject his head and grow it to the proportion of giants. Here's the thing though. Ivankov only does this on his face, but Kaido's gonna do it on his whole body. And despite how dangerous it is, Kaido would probably inject a whole ton of his crew prior to big battles in order to turn the beast pirates into fully jacked up piles of meat. There's even a chance that Kaido might see less need in the smile fruits because he only wanted them to make his crew more powerful. But with the Horu Horu no Mi, he can do that himself, regardless of any long-term consequence to the physical well-being of his crew, because with the smile fruits, we've already established that Kaido doesn't particularly care. Also, this fruit gives Kaido super healing, or at least temporary not pain feeling, so Kaido becomes even more invulnerable than he was before. His body, it's naturally tough, but now if he takes damage, whatever, he can just inject it away. And then there's the fun of gender swapping. With female opponents, Kaido might even use his abilities to make them male, desiring something of a tougher fight from his perspective, or maybe even handicap himself by fighting as a woman for the fun of it in a form that we are going to call Kaidet. There's not a huge focus on this aspect of the fruit though. It's pretty key for Ivankov because it plays into his themes and lifestyle, and whilst this aspect is not irrelevant to Kaido, it's not the main path that he's going to take with the fruit. But this isn't all great news for Mr. Kaido, as along with starvation, weapons manufacturer, a plan to plunge the world into war, and, general dickery, another great reason why Kaido isn't a fantastic role model is because of his substance abuse. Kaido is already an alcoholic, very much to his detriment, and now we've given him the power to create who knows how many assorted bodily reactions. So you've got him abusing a whole new substance to varying results. But to step back into the One Piece timeline, Kaido is eventually captured one too many times and experimented on at Punk Hazard. This is where Kaido's lineage factor was extracted, and that's how Vegapunk gained access to the all-important information to recreate his devil fruit. Although in this version, what Vegapunk gains is the code to the Horu Horu no Mi rather than the dragon fruit. So that's pretty big, because Stella, he needs to make that fruit so that Momonosuke can go on to eat it. And this is a problem that we'll get back to later. 28 years ago, Kaido gives birth to Yamato, or I suppose assists in the reproduction process. I mean, I don't know. In this world, both are possible. But Kaido decides to make Yamato male immediately after birth. Even prior to the Odin complex, you know that Kaido wanted a son. So he's not going to be dealing with any of this daughter business. 23 years ago is when the great clash of Kaido versus Gecko Moria took place. And here, Moria's entire crew are killed, and this defeat shatters him for the rest of his questionable existence. Except in this scenario, there's one more thing. To add insult to injury, Kaido is going to change Moria's gender, deeming him not strong enough to be a man, thus introducing us to Gecko Moria. Meanwhile, Kaido also had a habit of flying over the flower capital in his dragon form, mostly to instill fear and terror and hopelessness. So to achieve a similar effect, he'll need to do so as a giant Oni, and Wano is going to start to feel very Attack on Titan-y. If anything, this is only more appropriate though, because the story of Wano, particularly the story of the raid on Onigashima, is based on the story of Momotaro from Japanese folklore. And Momotaro doesn't fight a dragon, he fights Oni. So Kaido is doubling down on the thematics. Cut to 20 years ago, and this is Kaido versus Kozuki Odin. And it's turning out much the same way. This Kaido has access to raw strength that the real fictional Kaido could only dream of. And even if he didn't, there's gonna be an old woman to distract Odin anyway. So we've had a lot of Kaido, but now it's time to check in on Ivankov. 12 years ago, Ivankov accompanied Dragon to the Great Terminal. Now in the series, Dragon almost certainly uses his wind powers to clear a path. And weirdly enough, Ivankov could use his dragon powers to also create a wind path. But we also have the very important meeting of Ivankov and Crocodile. Now during Impel Down, Ivankov said, "If anything funny happens, I'll fix him. I know his weakness." So why is it that only Ivankov can fix Crocodile? Well, Oda says it's because he, meaning Crocodile, definitely owes something that Ivankov gave to him. Essentially, Crocodile was a woman, probably, maybe. It's a very good theory, and it's what we're going for in this video. However, in this world, Ivankov won't be able to change that, and so Crocodile will remain a woman, and we'll get back to her in a bit. Ivankov is sent to infiltrate Impel Down. Infiltrate by being deliberately caught and imprisoned. And this is incredibly important because it gives Dr. Vegapunk a sample of Ivankov's lineage factor, complete with the Seiryu Devil Fruit code. Without this, the artificial devil fruit that Momonosuke eats would have to be replaced with the Horu Horu no Mi as per the fun of the video. Luckily for him, it's feasible enough that Vegapunk could still make this fruit without sourcing the code from Kaido. Speeding up now, 8 years ago, Thalassa Lucas was present at the reverie and said, "I need to talk to you about a man named Dragon." A conversation which now gets entirely derailed by trying to establish who is named Dragon and who is just a dragon. It just doesn't make sense to have someone named Dragon when you have an actual dragon. You call that one Dragon. And fun fact, Thalassa Lucas was the king of Elysia Kingdom in West Blue, not to be confused with the Lucia Kingdom, which never existed. But look, there's been some controversy in the world of West Blue politics, because in the most recent reverie, Elysia Kingdom was represented by King Caesar, and Thalassa was not that old a man. So I suspect that Caesar was crowned under very suspicious, perhaps murdery circumstances. 4 years ago on Wano, Ace destroyed a dragon statue as a warning to Kaido. Now in this world, Kaido is still very self-absorbed, but a lot less obsessed with dragons because he isn't one. I mean, why would he build a monument to Revolutionary Army Commander Emporio Ivankov? It just doesn't make sense, Kaido. So instead, what we're going to have is a nice Kaido statue complete with lashes and a tight outfit. So Ace is going to see the statue and destroy it so that no eyes will ever be harmed by looking at it ever again. And then finally, 2 years ago, Monkey D. Luffy sets out on his adventure with absolutely no idea what awaits him. And the first change he's going to encounter is on Alabasta. Whilst attempting to save Vivi's kingdom, Luffy gets into a scuffle with Miss Zero. Now, potential situation here. Also present is Hasame the Crab, and he has a bit of a bizarre interest in human women and is motivated by, quote, arrow power. So this happened during the early days of the Viz translation, and they tried to tone it down by saying, the crab is blessed with the power of love. But in reality, the crab has a human kink. That's what it is. So there is a potential future where Crocodile can, quote, motivate Sami to not move by, exposing herself. However, Crocodile probably doesn't know this crab well enough to understand his personality. And even if she did, it's pretty out of character. Anyway, Luffy punches 2 women in this arc, one much more so than the other, and we save the kingdom. Yay. So then even more things happen until the Straw Hats find themselves lost in the Florian Triangle, inevitably encountering the next warlord of the sea. And then, out of the darkness, they hear an ominous laugh that sounds like Ki-shi-shi-shi-shi. But I want it noted that this laugh is now spelt as Ki-shi-shi-shi, because the Straw Hats are now fighting against Gecko Maria. And this is going to cause some ethical issues for Sanji, who did attempt to attack Moria during the Straw Hats versus Oars. But also, how does Sanji's chivalry work if a female snake neck pilot is controlling the corpse of a male ancient giant? Zeph's lessons did not prepare Sanji for this sort of complex chivalry maths. Also, we should flag that Absalom would have a bit of an awkward crush on his boss, and let's be completely real here, he would absolutely turn invisible and spy on Moria in the bathroom. That's just what he is/was. To get to the main problem though, Luffy very possibly dies in Impel Down, because Ivankov doesn't have the Emporio healing hormone, and the dragon fruit doesn't have any healing properties. But there is an antidote to Magellan's poison, which Shiryu has, somehow. I say somehow because he's also a prisoner, and it's never really explained much beyond, if I hadn't shown up with the antidote, you'd all be dead. And Blackbeard goes on to say, luck may decide who lives and who dies. And he does this in what I would only describe as a horrifically shirtless state, but I agree with him regardless. I think that Luffy is lucky enough that Ivankov and the level 5.5 prisoners will somehow acquire the antidote. Someone will have heard of its existence, then they'll track it down, they will acquire it, they'll give it to Luffy, everything's going to be good, and it's all going to happen somehow, because if somehow is good enough for Blackbeard, it's good enough for Luffy. The healing hormone also costs Luffy 10 years of his life, so at the very least he gets those 10 years back, and hey, this might even be a better outcome than the actual one we got. The Jailbreak team go to level 6, and would you look who it is, our old friend Crocodile, former presidentress of Baroque Works. Very nice to have you on our side, but with this Ivankov, it's kind of overkill. With the powers of Seiryu, Magellan isn't really an issue, because Ivankov can just blow back all of the poison, just wink it all away. If anything, Ivankov can even do what Momonosuke did on Onigashima, and just fly up through the entire building, just death winking through every floor. And instead of needing to call whales, everyone can fly away on Ivankov, and also fly into Marineford riding a dragon. What an entrance. Just prior to this, the remaining warlords have gathered, and Boa Hancock goes out of her way to make it known that Gecko Moria is the second most beautiful warlord to participate in the war. And as they're on opposing sides, Miss Crocodile and Gecko Maria may even have a brief all-girl duel. Elsewhere, Kaido attempts to participate in the Paramount War, taking King with him, but he is stopped somehow by Shanks, who has to fight and or converse with Kaido, whilst trying to avert his eyes from the ever-present bulge in Kaido's leotard. However, back at Marineford, Luffy has a fatigue problem. The only thing that kept him going through all of Impel Down and Marineford was Ivankov consistently injecting him. However, for plot reasons, Luffy will try, but it's not ending any better. Ace will still be executed, but maybe even at the gallows where it was meant to be, and Law will likely still need to rescue Luffy. Ivankov could try to fly Luffy to safety, but Kizaru can just catch them. So underwater is our only option. Post-war, Ivankov departs and probably flies back to Momoiro Island, where he encounters Sanji. Here, hilarity ensues and Sanji challenges Ivankov to a fight. And this goes even less well for him than it did in the actual series, as Ivankov transforms into a mythical dragon. Then 2 years later, after Dressrosa, Kaido probably doesn't fall from a sky island. In retrospect, he almost certainly got up there by flying, so Rouge never meets him. Kaido does still attack Kid's Island, but in a more traditional manner, but also in a less traditional manner with lots and lots of gender swapping. In fact, Kid and Killer's refusal to back down will lead to defeat and the Gecko Moria treatment of turning them both into women. Basil Hawkins will surrender and thus be allowed to keep his straw parts. And if not for him betraying the alliance, Scratch Men Apu may have found himself becoming Scratch Women Apu. But all of this sets the stage for Wano. Post Whole Cake Island, Kaido has a conversation with Big Mom where they argue about who gets to kill Luffy, and Big Mom insists that she gets to because Kaido owes her. But in this world, there's no debt because she more or less accidentally cursed Kaido, and if anything, she owes him. But during his first day at Wano, Luffy encounters a giant Kaido parading around the flower capital, and that doesn't go well. Luffy gets thrown into prison and encounters Eustace Kid, noticing that there's something definitely different about him, but can't quite figure out what it is. And then to the day of the raid, there is a major difference. Because Kaido can't make Onigashima float. He can, however, turn into a giant and try to carry the island to plonk it on top of the flower capital. I mean, if oars could pull continents, then Kaido as a giant could lift a modest private island. But it's going to be real tough for him to both fight and carry the island. But Kaido does go on to be defeated and potentially killed. It's still a bit vague. And if so, Kid, Killer, and Moria may have their bodies returned to normal, or they may not. In fact, probably not. However, our dragon legacy will live on through Ivankov as he proceeds to put those powers to use in the final saga.